Okay, so we're going to do some Photoshop. We're going to learn about adjustment layers. We're going to learn about masks, and we're also going to mainly get used to using the brush shortcuts. So the first thing we want to do is File, Open, and we're going to go into our Photoshop lesson masks. Okay, so you're going to have a different folder, and you're going to have a lot more pictures in here because you're going to do more pictures. But for now, I'm just going to do 01 hot balloon. And at the moment, we've got one layer, which is our picture. If your Photoshop looks a bit different to mine, you might have the Learn tab there. If there's something so you can't see the layers panel, for example, just go Window and Layers. I'm just gonna get rid of this for a second just so I can show you what happens. Photoshop, you can sort of adjust the layout of everything on the screen. So I'm just gonna go Window, Layers, and it'll pop up in its own separate tab, and then you can dock it wherever you want. Can you dock it there? Yeah. So I could dock it on that side if I wanted to. Can I dock it up top? No. Dock it anywhere around here. But where it highlights blue, that's where it's gonna dock. So I've just dropped it in there. Sometimes things will be open, like this history here. If you want to get rid of something, you can just, I don't need the history. Actually, I'll get rid of this too. Oh no. Sometimes it can play up like so. If you do mess everything up, you can just go to Reset Essentials and everything will be back. I want to get rid of this. That's better. That's how I do it. Okay, cool. So hopefully you've got all your layers visible, and we also want to have adjustments visible. So if I click on my adjustments panel, we want to go to this one here. So if you hover over them, you'll see that the word up here changes. You're looking for the black and white, which is black and white square, and you'll see that our image just goes straight black and white. So what's actually happened down here in our layers panel, we've got a black and white filter that's cutting out all of the color coming up through. So anything below it, there'll be no color through. This white square here is called a mask, and if I have it selected, which when your mask is selected, it'll have that white box around it, I can draw within the mask. So if I grab my brush tool, and if I grab my black color on top, if that's not black and white, just hit this button here, which turns everything, it gets your foreground color white and your background color black, and then switch it with that. So when you work with masks, you usually work in blacks and whites, and I'll show you why. So I'm just going to paint a bit of black there, and as you can see in my layer, my mask preview, you can see where I've just painted those two black bits of black brush strokes, and the colors coming through. If I then paint white, so I can switch between black and white by doing that. Oops, I'll show you how to do that in a second. You can see that wherever there's white, that filter will work. So I'll go back to white and I'll show you guys how to do this. So we want our black selected. Our brush tool, our idea for this is we're gonna make the balloon colorful and everything else leave it black and white. So to zoom in, you hold Alt and scroll. Alt's pretty big in this, so you'll use Alt a fair bit. Alt, hold down your right mouse button, and you should get something that looks like this, and then move with those two held down. If you move left and right, then this will change your brush size. So if I just go to, say, about that size there, 275 pixels, cool, and then I can paint nice and easy inside of my balloon. The thing with this activity, you're going to be changing your brush size quite a bit, so you hold, like, it's good to be able to just really quickly hold Alt, right click, change your brush size, because what works for that part of the balloon, I'm going to have to zoom right in and then change my brush size and go in and do this. And you get better at this as you go along. If you make a mistake, if you go over, so you can see right there I've gone over, and I'll make it a bit more obvious. So there's the sky. You could work backwards and just paint everything black and then get your white brush and go over and paint the black and white filter back in. Then that is another way to do it. I wouldn't recommend it with this one just because of how the brush works. It's better to work from the inside out. So I might just Control Z all of that. Another thing with Photoshop, when you Control Z, it'll undo and redo. So one doesn't seem to be doing anything because it's undoing what I last did and redoing it. So I'll just make an example here. 1, 2, 3, 4. So if I hit Control Z, it undoes that and then it redoes it. If I want to go further back, further steps than 1, I need to go Control Alt Z. Then I can go further back in time. And that's where I'm at. So I'm just gonna finish doing this. Also, when you're zooming in and out, your zoom will go wherever your mouse is. I'm sure you've probably figured that out already. Another thing. So when you're holding Alt and right click and going left and right to change your size, you'll notice that there's a hardness if you go up and down. So if you go right down, and I'll show you the difference between the two. So this is with my hardness at 0%. Oh, hang on, that's white. I need to go black. 0%, hardness at 50%, hardness at 100%. And you can see the difference between the edge of that brush and that. And what I'm actually how I'm scrolling is like Illustrator Control and scroll will go left and right, and it's just scrolling up and down will move the what am I thinking of? The stage up and down. So up and down for scroll, and Control up scroll is left and right. Hopefully that makes sense. Control Alt Z to get rid of all those, and then I'm just going to finish off this basket bit here. Whoa, my brush is so big there. And you can notice that we're pretty zoomed in at the moment because you can actually see all these little square pixels. This is a pretty high res image. I think it's about 4K, a 4K image, maybe even more actually. I can't remember what it was when I downloaded it, but it's designed to be a wallpaper. So even though we probably don't need to get that detailed, because if I make a little mistake there or there, wherever, if I zoom right out with something so small, when your artwork's on the stage there, you're not even going to notice, really. So the higher the resolution of your picture, the better this task will work. For the advanced users, you might want to do the reflection, which I just did then. It is a little bit harder than just going around the outside of that balloon because you've got all of these little jaggedy bits, and I've just sort of rushed it as well. I could do it a bit better too. Well, there's bits that I've missed in there, but I mean, it does, when you zoom out, remember that it does sort of all, like, it's not really that big in the big scheme of things. Another thing that you can have a play around with is actually changing the color of all this stuff. So another adjustment layer, if you add the hue saturation, you'll see I've got another adjustment layer here, and this should pop up the properties for that. If I change the hue, you'll notice all the colors on my balloon are going to change, and I can do some pretty funky stuff with that. It probably doesn't really work that well with the balloon, but you could change the color of a bird to be, instead of like a yellow, it might be a pink or a red or a blue, and sometimes you can get a really cool effect with that. So that's something to keep in mind too. What you're essentially doing, if I get rid of this filter, the black and white filter, you're actually changing the hue for the whole picture. But because our colors aren't coming through from the bottom layer through this black and white layer, you can't tell. It's only changing for the bits that we've made, for the bits that we are able to see. Okay, so yeah, go and have a play around with the other photos in the folder, in the same folder that the hot balloon image was in, and yeah, see how you go, see what you can come up with.